just say that I'm Rebecca Sutton. I'm Philip's daughter, and this is Philip, which I suspect you probably already guessed. And over here is Tim. Oh, I'm going to let him say his surname.
McClure.
McClure. And they're going to do the talk after we've seen the film, which we've only had for a month. It was filmed in 1952. It was Philip's first exhibition at the Slade, just as a student, when Roland Browse and Delbanca, that were art dealers in London, came to see him there. So that's the beginning. The person that found this film and cleaned it up for us is a man called Robert Corrin, and he is a film...
Archivist.
Oh, thank you, Dad.
I'm going to start first of all by reading something that was written about the exhibition we've just seen and those paintings. And it's by someone called David Story, who was a student at the Slade when Philip was displaying these paintings, and this was written as a kind of foreword to a catalogue for, I think, an exhibition of these paintings. Not knowing anything about Philip Sutton, I went into the Slade Library one day to consult a particular art book and was immediately distracted by 20 or 40 paintings hanging on a wall. They were, in the context of my first term at the Slade, totally unexpected, full of light and colour, and giving the immediate impression of windows opening onto novel landscape and interiors. He then goes on to say that 3 people, one of them Philip, then came into the library and talked about the exhibition. He stayed sitting to one side. Initially, sitting alone and looking at these paintings, my imagination was caught by their colours, their vibrancy and exuberance. I recognised the reference back to Matisse and the great European painters, but more as a source of inspiration rather than a desire for imitation. There was even something consistent between the artist's appearance and personality, and the alacrity and spontaneity of the pictures themselves. A feeling of someone coming to nature without any learned preconceptions. Now, that's not bad, is it?
Well, I think that last phrase is
Yes.
the key to everything I've ever done, actually. Because there's no, I don't, because I admire many things from the past, but I don't imitate them. I've no desire, and it's never crossed my mind to imitate them. It's just that things belong just to me, or being a human being like everyone else. And people that are all the great painters that they've been, just human beings as well. Anyway, it was an unconscious parenthood, shall we say,
Yes.
from learning.
Well, we'll probably come back to that in a minute, but let me say, first of all, explain why I'm sitting here with you. For the last year, Phil and I have been meeting once a week in his, his studio, really, which is, I mean, it's a wonderful thing, just once a week to go in and be surrounded by, Phil's work through the ages. And the ages haven't stopped because there's always something new there. And I know that when I get up from the chair that I'm sitting in, I shall be covered in paint on my rear end. What we have done for the last year is that we have, basically I went there. The first sort of point in going there was to read to Philip. And so he had sort of got together this assortment of books that we might like to read. And so what we have done is that we read a book or a bit of a book, and then we sit there and talk about it. Or not, we might start talking about other things. But I was initially extremely surprised at the books, some of the books anyway, that we read, and the ones that I think that we stuck with and got most deeply involved in. 2 books by someone called Sarah Bakewell, How to Live, which is a book about Montaigne, and another one by her, The Existentialist Cafe, which is all about Sartre, de Beauvoir, and we'll hear more of this guy, Merleau-Ponty. We've also found a book by Emily Herring called Herald of a Restless World about Henri Bergson, who is new to both of us. And we've got really quite excited about that too, haven't we? We've also read a book about Einstein, and I have to admit that for about 12 seconds I thought I understood the general theory of relativity. We've also read short stories, H.E. Bates, P.G. Wodehouse. We've had the other day we had Flaubert, and Turgenev, who's another favourite of yours, Phil. Or we just sit there chatting about stuff. And it's a bit of we're a kind of odd couple, really, because we don't really have, our backgrounds are completely different. And so it's been a wonderful experience, and I hope it goes on for a long time. I hope you hope that too. And we've only got one thing in common, really, and that's our birthday.
Mr. Sutton, you'll live forever.
Our birthday is on the same day. Let me ask you a question, Phil. You left school at 14 and went to work for in a drawing office, and then when you became 17 or 18, you had to do your national service and went into the RAF and did 3 years rather than the normal 2 because of the Berlin airlift. And Philip was in Berlin servicing aircraft there. He went in as a mechanic. When he managed to escape the military, he chose to go to the Slade School of Art because the opportunity was there to people coming out of the services like that to, they were given a free place at anywhere they wanted to go virtually. And so what it would be good to hear is, why did you choose the Slade School of Art? Not why was it the Slade, I guess, but why did you choose really to develop yourself as a painter?
Well, the story goes back to when I was a child, I think. And my mother used to get me to do the Christmas cards. She said, we were quite poor. We weren't poverty-stricken, but we were very poor. And she said, we don't want to buy Christmas cards. You do some birds or something very Christmassy. So I used to do that. And that kind of got buried somewhere in me. Because it was only a very small fraction of the thing. The whole thing was very simple. Sometimes things like that stay with you, and they sort of, in some kind of strange way, get bigger. Of course, they don't really. It's just in your imagination. I thought when leaving the RAF that I had to. The Labour government brought in this policy of free education at universities for people who've been in the army and so on. And I basically couldn't spell, and basically I couldn't write. And I thought of being a doctor or professor of something at somewhere, but I knew that it was hopeless because I couldn't do this writing. It was very necessary for any of those professions. And then it struck me very clearly that if I chose going to an art school, I didn't need to do any of those things. Spelling things and so on. And I think, although that sounds almost silly, as near as I can say it's the truth, I think that was the thing that more or less convinced me that, well, the art school could have me because they wanted to ask how you spell, but that didn't come into it. And so I started there, and of course at the beginning I was very handicapped because I didn't know my Michelangelo from Mr. Smith's work and so on. But I soon realised that there was something in this drawing, a pencil mark on a paper, a pen on a paper. It was something that it was like a kind of signpost to me saying, come on in, Phil. And I think I more or less listened to this inner voice or something like that. And anyway, I settled down, and then quite by chance, my brother, who'd been killed in the RAF, he bombed Germany in the war, he'd been a draftsman at the same place as where I was an office boy. He'd left a whole lot of bottles of coloured inks, purple, bright red, bright yellow, and so on. And then I had the brilliant idea. I thought, well, I'll take those colours into the slate, and instead of drawing, we had to sit in what was known as the antique room, which had these very large statues, which were much bigger than real life, naked ladies, which were all covered in dust. They were never dusted, so you could write your name on their bottom if you wanted. And we sat there, and then I thought, this is not very interesting. And then I thought of all these lovely colours. So I proceeded to take these colours in and started to use mauve and orange and all those things, which of course was nothing to do with anything that was done. Nobody else was doing such a thing. There was about 40 of us, the new intake. And of course I was the only one using it. And when Mr. Carter, who was our teacher, saw what I was doing, he was absolutely appalled. He said, but that's not what they are at all. I said, no, they aren't like that at all. But I've got these inks, I thought I'd use them. For some reason or other, I actually learned to know him as my career went on. And of course he was kind of what you might call a member of the old school. And of course these inks were absolutely foreign to anything that he appreciated or could approve of. So there I was in the corner with everybody drawing appropriately sort of black and white things of these naked ladies and plaster. And there was me doing mauve, pink and red and green. And this didn't go down very well with him. well, in retrospect, I can see that he was a very conservative gentleman, really, who landed up. His claim to fame, I think, he'd written something about perspective in the Encyclopedia Britannica, which had got him the job at the Sladers Yard. So when he saw my coloured inks, he was absolutely appalled. And for some strange reason, there are many things that one doesn't really understand. I sort of felt it was a kind of crucial thing, these colours. I've no idea why, but it seemed to me really very interesting. And he couldn't appreciate it. He didn't appreciate me, and he didn't appreciate the colours. But I went on, sort of, at Wildland, and that was in a very strange, upside down sort of way. That was the beginning of realising that colour of anything, an apple or a sunset, anything you like to think of, it's not the key to understanding what it is, because the instruments that you've got, pen, pencils, colour and so on, have nothing to do with sunsets and what things really are. So there's this gap between what things seem to be and what you've got in your hand. As I say, that thereby hangs the tale, because it seemed to me completely obvious. You could do anything in any colour about anything that you looked at, as long as it was authentic to you. The thing was, the colour didn't have to relate to what you were looking at. It had to relate to whatever was in your mind, or what you felt. And that was, in a way, that was the beginning of the 75-year career, or 90, I mean, I always say 70, it's 95, so anyway, a long time, years and years. And I've done many paintings, and the colour, of course, has nothing to do with what I'm looking at.
Well,
I never intended it to be.
now
There we are.
Yeah.
There we are, Tim.
Now we're on to colour. Should we talk about the self-portraits a bit? I mean, there's plenty of colour, and they're not all portraits, but there are a lot of them. And really, I suppose, and it follows on from what you've been saying, really, I mean, quite a lot of them, you're wearing a silly hat, or there's a bird lurking somewhere on your head or on your shoulder, or both. Oh, and there's one, isn't there, with a shopping bag. Now, what's going on here?
Are you asking?
I'm asking you.
The short answer is I don't know. You see, you can do the thing about drawing and making images of any kind, whatever kind of artist you are. And even if you're a musician, for instance, and it's not painting, it's sound, the question of it relating to real things is really immaterial. If it is, it's okay, and if it isn't, it's okay. But it's not essential. And that's really the whole point of the colour kind of painting that anybody can do. Anyone can pick up colours and be free with them. But the crunch of the matter, of course, is that it's not actually picking up different colours that is so attractive. What's really attractive is that you let go of whatever, the apple on a plate, the sun on the lawn, the dog going for a walk, or whatever the subject is. You let go of the subject and you reinvent something and you might say, well, what is the something? Well, I can't answer that because it's sort of within you, and everybody's subject is different. So what would apply to me wouldn't in any way apply to somebody else. It's a form of liberation, really. And it's a wonderful form of liberation because the reason is, what I've discovered over the years is that colour gives us a very emotional feeling, like sound of an instrument, play a note on a piano or something on a cello, just a bar, something very simple. That is something very beautiful in itself. Of course, if you write music or paint or make other things, it all to do with the relationship between one thing and another, of course. So it's more complicated than I'm saying. But basically, it's quite simple. Is that it's not actually related directly. It doesn't, or I'll put it another way, it doesn't have to be related. The colour can be invented, just like if you were a writer and you invent characters to be good, very good or very bad people, and you can do anything on a scale. That's what good writers do, of course. They do exactly that. Good painters, I think, or good musicians or carpenters and so on, all do the same. They reinvent the language that they're using. And I personally, just from my opinion, is the key to creating things. You reinvent something, and that's where the magic, I think, comes in. A certain magic creeps in when you reinvent things. You even think, how did you do it yourself? You look at it and you think, that's amazing. And that's what you've done. But it's not being patronising to yourself or anything like that. It's just it's amazement that you can discover things for yourself. And the world of colour is one of those things that you can discover.
Mm.
Do you want this? You talked when we were talking the other day. You talked about a portrait being a theatrical experience. So, do you want to retract that, or do you?
Well, of course, when I was talking about colour, I was leaving a lot of other items out, like fantasy and like things that are ideal, sort of perfect in their own way. And some things are obtainable, you can actually obtain. And I think with the way you put things together can be quite magical, as long as you're not knowing what you're actually doing. As I understand it, and it's only my opinion, of course, as I understand it, you have to be innocent of what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing, but your skills that come into whatever it is, whether it's a flower, a boat on the ocean with the sun going down, or ducks feeding in a pond or so on, whatever it is, things have a magic of their own. And the only way you can discover that is to close down your own imagination and wait. And then while you're waiting, if you're lucky or whatever way you like to describe chance, something happens. And that something is what moves us when we hear the music or read the novel. We think that's wonderful, wonderful. It only comes to you like that if you close down what you intend to do. So there, in other words, there seems to me to be a very strong thread of innocence in the process. And I always think of Mozart as a very good example. It seemed to me that Mozart himself, and of course you can argue that this is just my invention, it's nothing to do with Mozart, but somehow he manages to write down the music which is not purposely directed. So in other words, there's an element of discovery, of unfolding something that is not there and is unfolding in front of your it's your ears, because the case of music, the case of painting or literature, it's your eyes that take it in. I personally think that that's the whole key to the story, from cave paintings of 24,000 years ago to what we try to do now. So I think it's the same. It's got this innocence.
I don't know how you do it, but can we move from painting to philosophy? Would that be a good idea? What is it that draws you to French philosophers? And just before you answer, you see the elephant in the foyer. Ponty, named after a certain Maurice Merleau-Ponty, who, you're rather keen on. So why is that?
Philosophy has, of all philosophers, they have really you can approach them from A to Z. It depends which way you want to go. I think with Ponty and I don't know, I'm not very learned, don't misunderstand me, I'm not very learned in the philosophical standing of the various philosophers, although I'm very interested in them. With Ponty, one thing, he lived at the end of the 19th and went into the 20th. I think he died in 1926.
61.
When?
He died in 1961.
1961? 61. Oh.
Yeah.
I think he put tremendous emphasis on researching children, and I think he actually taught in a school with children. Unlike other philosophers, he did actually end up as professor at the Sorbonne, I think, something like that, before he died. But the thing was that he put a great emphasis on our beginning, and it's always seemed to me a key factor in any of us, that our childhood, our parents, the home we come from, whether it's comfortable or very not comfortable, very difficult financially, or the opposite, very comfortable and so on. We're all subject to our childhood. To me, this is a big factor in trying to find out which way to go forward in my work, my own work. It's not that I can get the clues from my childhood. It's that I realise I'm a product of my family. I don't know, that may not mean much to anyone here, but to me it means a great deal. I think that we're very influenced by our family, our sense of good and rightness and what we want to achieve in life and all those sort of things. Anyway, I think the time is, we ought to get to when there's questions.
We will. Don't worry. We will get to questions, but I just want to say,
Yes.
I found a quote the other day from Merleau-Ponty, which to me makes the point that actually you and he are very much kindred spirits. And he said this: philosophy is wonder in the face of the world. And I think what we have around us on the walls is an example of your wonder in the face of the world. So I think
That's a good note.
that's a good note to finish this bit, and to say, if anyone has any questions.
I very much enjoyed what you've been saying, and I wanted to know if your fascination and passion about art has helped you to live to your current age.
A bit like saying, do you eat a lot of carrots?
I don't feel it.
That's the secret. No, I think life, the whole thing about, you know, going to whatever age you are, first of all, there's a very big sadness all around you because your friends are not there anymore. And that's something which is very sad. On the other hand, it's difficult to see, really, whatever age you are, 18, 28, 38, 58, and so on, it's very difficult, whichever little mountain you look on with the age, to think that that's more or less everything. You know, I think the mystery of just being alive and aware of different things, you know, politics, society, money, sex, and all the different things that human beings are affected by. We're all affected by. And it's very difficult to pinpoint something and say, that's the factor. And I think it'd be pure fiction on my part to say any of the things. Of course, one of the contributions of one's life is how people have helped you on the way, different. First your parents, and then the family or the wider circle, and then if you're lucky to meet somebody that you live with, marry, or have children, and so on. Chance plays such a big point. I've had friends who make very unfortunate relationships consistently, and they're more or less my age. And everything they've ever done has ended in disaster. Now, what could one say about such a thing? Well, it's sad, but it's consistent. And then the opposite is true, that you get someone who is favoured by fate. They meet somebody good that they live with or marry or whatever. They have a comrade in life adventures. And
Let's see if there's another question.
yes, what's the next question?
I grew up with some of your paintings because my father bought them when I was a boy in the 1960s and 1970s. And he bought many paintings, and yours had the greatest dash of colour. And he did that because his father was a close friend of Heinz Roland, of Roland Browers and Del Banco, who I think were your early gallery. But the question I wanted to ask you, Mr. Sutton, is you've had a consistency of theme through right the way from the 1950s self-portraits of a particular sort, and as Tim said, often with a bird attached to an object, and then these wonderful landscapes, of which that I think is a particularly wonderful one just there. And I wondered why you kept to those particular subjects, to self-portraits and to particular landscapes with vibrant colour. What drove you to those subjects, and why did you stick with them over a career of 70 years?
Well, of course, the simple answer really is I don't know. We're partly creatures of habit, which creeps in wherever much we endeavour to keep the doors closed. Habit creeps in. So that's a factor. Another factor is if you have a certain feeling about, you buy a house and you've got a field opposite, and the farmer, the friend in the village keeps his horse there, so you see every morning you wake up, there's a horse in the field and so on. So the circumstances tip in very much to real life, which has nothing to do with art at all. It's what happens. And if you're a sensitive person, with either symphonies or literature or painting or poetry, or even sort of acting, really, in a way that you can interpret such things, you respond to such things. And I think part of this, what you might call the secret of creativity, which comes in it's got nothing to do with painting or anything like that, or symphonies. I mean, they are creative, of course, but so is the fashion in dress or discovering countries, foreign places. People are affected. I long ago realised that you could have two people who have very similar experiences of whatever it is, countries, places. The result of those two people is totally different because everything about them responds differently. And we're like that. We've probably got over 100 people or something in this room at this moment. And we all respond very differently, completely differently to different things. And I think that's how it is.
Yeah.
If you see the horse in the farmer's field and you think, I like the theatre there, I want to respond to it, and you go back to the studio and you think, right, I'm going to get a canvas, I'm going to start, and then there's a white canvas there, and you think, should I paint the field? Should I paint the horse? Shall I get blue on my paintbrush? Is it all going to happen at once? Is it going to go at different speeds? How does it happen?
I'm sorry.
If we could just leave the horse on one side, and we see a tree with leaves on. There's a slight wind blowing, and a leaf on a tree breaks away because of the wind. It slowly flutters to the ground, which happens to have a stream going through. The leaf falls in the stream and goes downstream. Now, there's no explanation I can think of that would explain the wind, strength of the leaf, the fluttering down through the stream, and there's no way that could be, even as you say, the story of it, as it were, the little story of the leaf. It doesn't explain anything. And so the answer to your question, as far as I can understand it. It's no answer.
I think
Why did you have a canvas there in the first place? The second place is you've seen the horse many times. Every time you drive in and out your property and so on, you see the horse. It's a very strange chance plays a hand. And if we try and see a meaning to the chance, I think it's possibly, misunderstanding, really. Because there is no meaning to the leaf falling or the horse in the field, or even starting the canvas. There's no meaning to why it should happen. It just happens. And I think that's quite a difficult concept to take on board. But it's very fundamental to creativity. You take things on board for no specific reason. Maybe you had too much for breakfast, or someone's giving you trouble, or something. There's no specific reason why you would do such a thing, or even contemplate such a thing. But it happens.
Thank
I
you.
don't know whether that's satisfactory.
It seems to me that the portraits are very different to the landscapes, because you look at yourself in a different way. Perhaps it's not the sort of straightforward wonder. There's a lot more kind of interplay in the portraits, and it's perhaps there's an element of theatre, and the hats and the costumes are part of that. Does that ring true to you? That there's a kind of drama element?
Portrait object one is, strictly speaking, I suppose, a made up subject. A bit like looking at the field with a horse in. I mean, it could be a field with 10 horses, or it could be anything. And so the same with the portrait, in a way, that it could be any. We're all faced with a huge variety of possibilities of, if you like, if you're a painter, you've got different things you can paint, obviously, from apples on a plate to an empty room, and this sunset, the storm, and ships at sea, and so go on and on, inventing subjects. It's a strange thing, this chance, because you might just be walking up the garden path, not thinking of anything, just thinking, oh, I must take the car in this afternoon to be serviced, or something very ordinary like that, as you walk up the garden path to do something. And then it strikes you that, that, of course, what I must do is do a portrait. And that just drops out of the sky. There's no reason. I personally find that if you look for a reason for what one might call happenings, it's a lost cause. Of course, many people excuse certain people, are very religious, and they think that God or their particular religion that they believe in plays a role in what they are or where they are or whatever it is. So their vision of things is narrow, I would say, would be narrowed down because of their feelings about religion. If you don't have that, then it's open to anything. There might be a cold breeze and you feel, you haven't got the right clothes on, you feel cold. And while you're feeling cold, you think, yes, I must do whatever it is.
You have given us so much. Well, I never thought we'd finish on theology, but that's rather nice. Phil, I think that's been a good hour's worth, and you deserve some fish and chips.
I just say thank you so much to Tim for your wonderful questions, and so great to have somebody who really knows Phil and chats with him every week to come and talk with him.
Okay.
And so wonderful to hear you, Phil. And I'm going to put the lights on, and do come and look at all these amazing paintings. It's an absolute joy to have them here in the Sladers Yard, and an honour. So thank you.